Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's session in our conversations with women of significance in STEM leadership. And this is a series of conversations that I am hosting. My name is Leah Zalams, and I'm the founder and lead coach for Z-Axis Leadership Consultancy. And the reason that we are looking into the success traits and the career paths of women who are creating successful careers in STEM, there are a lot of jobs that are coming up in the future, and we do not have a big enough pool of STEM educated and STEM trained students and young people coming through. And there is a lot of disparity both in the gender pay gap, in racial, in other areas that are creating the mismatch of the not just the gender balance, as I said, but from a racial perspective, from all perspectives. So this purpose of these conversations is to look at what some of these women are doing who are creating success in spite of those biases, in spite of the barriers, in spite of the systemic issues which are stopping a lot of our younger women from choosing STEM careers. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Catherine Fargher. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, Leah. Great to be here.
Yes, so Catherine, you are a very skillful and multi-talented, multifaceted professional, and you're particularly interesting to me because you have not come from that traditional engineering or technical background in your original university degree, but here you are, the founder of a educational Edtech company, creating a digital platform, Dr. Egg Adventures, so very much in the nitty-gritty as a founder and a driver of that business. So we're very keen to explore your career background and some of your strategies for how you are navigating this complex world of technology and business and life. So perhaps I'll start with you. If you could just give us a little helicopter view of your career and what you are doing now and what problem that solves.
Hi, thanks, Leah. Look, yes, I must say I've always had a quite eclectic approach to things, and I was reflecting on your questions and noticed that really I did do 3 science subjects in my final equivalent of a HSC year in Adelaide, and I was in the leading academic high school. In fact, there was one year which I shared a classroom, in fact, with you, which is very funny. Great memories. But I did physics, chemistry, and maths. Now, this was interesting because at that time, and I won't date myself too much, but it was sort of late 70s, we were encouraged to do science subjects, but not with a view of science careers necessarily. We were encouraged to do science subjects because of the more logical or sequential nature, that you could get very good marks because there was a yes or no answer often. Whereas in the humanities, it was much more subjective, it was less objective. And I also came from a scientific and tech family. My grandfather was an engineer, my grandfather was an engineer, so and mathematician. So I was good at those subjects, but I was encouraged to do them for an outcome which was either law or medicine. That was at the time the prize degrees, that you would try and get into law or medicine, and you would do so by doing as many science subjects as possible. So I actually went into law, which was an interesting first degree in that it taught me very good research and language skills. I've been able to, as well as continue to love research, which led me to doing a doctorate and moving more towards actually an integration of science and creativity, in fact, because through law I discovered I had been very good at languages as well and debating, and so I kind of went into law thinking that that was a strength. But in fact, over time, I've had a great interest in a number of subjects. I do remember speaking to a professor, a friend of my dad's, who said, genetics is the future. Think about a job in genetics. Now, at the time, no one talked about genetics. I knew nothing about genetics. interestingly, in my doctoral project, I explored genetic futures and reproduction, and I created a set of feasible fictions and possible products around that subject matter. I did a doctorate in creative writing, but I created hybrid works. So interestingly, again, partly in some ways encouraged by Australian government funding trends, I was working in the arts, and there was a lot of emphasis on hybrid arts, what was called hybrid arts, collaborating with scientists, exploring classical forms of art such as theatre, writing, but adding into that new technology. So this idea of an interface with new technologies. And so the early 2000s, I did receive quite a bit of funding with two other new mums actually to explore new genetic futures and reproduction. We'd all just become mums, and we were all performer writers, and we started to create these feasible fictions and possible products. And one of mine was this idea of a series of morality tales about biotech ethics. Because during my pregnancy, interestingly, I found the science around the genetic testing, even ultrasounds, I found it quite scary at times. And I wrote a number of fables almost out of sort of fear of trying to make sense of these new sciences. And those products that we came up with, the other one was finding that DNA patterning had a lot in common with knitting. So I sort of thought, this is a bit too kooky for the real world. I'm going to take it for a doctorate. So I sort of ended up doing a doctorate around biotech fables, and also created a series of hybrid performance works like a biotech display home where I knitted real DNA. So I went to the kooky extreme, but I also created a play that was accessible to kids. It was produced by the Opera House, and it went to America and Canada. It had great success, and we've had funding to turn it into an interactive story world for kids. So it's basically a science story world. And finally, just to segue to now, we were accepted into the Macquarie University Incubator Hub and have had this great partnership with Macquarie University School of Education, who, through their STEM leader, Dr. Anne Forbes, she's helped us really hone our product. So we now are doing STEM education, but with this combination of a kind of story world that's exciting for kids. Two problems I want to solve. One is how to get girls at a younger age, so more that primary age, where basically, according to Anne and other researchers, girls are making their decisions about STEM not at high school, but in primary school. And so all the chief scientists and people I spoke to during my doctorate all said, you've got to start early, kindergarten, primary school, to get kids thinking and having fun.
And I've seen research that already by the age of 6, a lot of girls have been turned off science by the age of 6 already. So exciting to hear. You've really been a pioneer in bringing together the creativity with real world problems and solving them with a technical product with the excitement and fun of creativity. So where did it come from, Catherine, for you in terms of, it sounds like you've been very introspective in listening to what you are curious about. You have a deep curiosity about humanity, I hear. And you mentioned that I think your father was an engineer, but there was a lot of expectation for you to perform well in your career, as you say, law or medicine. As you were speaking about that, you are absolutely right. I had forgotten that the reason we were encouraged to do science was because it was easier
to get the high marks,
to get the marks,
yes,
to get into those degrees.
Yes.
And we wonder why.
I did want to add that my other parents, so I think my mum was an art teacher, a creative art teacher. And so she was a painter. And my dad had a great interest in theatre and arts as well. So in some ways, for a long time, I thought, oh gosh, am I just living this wish fulfillment for my dad? He always wanted to be a theatre director or an actor. And I did try a few of those things. My brother Matthew's a composer. So we had these two sides, the art and the science. And I think it was a household with a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation about the philosophy behind these things. But also, I did have a period where I looked, what would my noble goal, what would the service I would like to do? I think it was after I'd had my son, and I did have a very strong feeling, and I've heard other parents talk about this. I had a very strong desire to leave a legacy. And there were two things that came out with that thought. One was that period of 7 to 11 for me was an amazing time of imagination. And I did love books about science, and I did love that sense. I remember one, Madeleine L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time, where, you know, we entered this fourth dimension with her. And I remember the absolute excitement of living in a whole world that suggested things about science and about fantasy and about whole worlds. And so one thing I wanted to create some sort of world for kids. But the other thing, I identified that I had a lot of experience in teaching and sharing ideas, and also that idea of creating imaginative spaces. Imagination was an enormously important thing for me at that time of 7 to 11 and 12. And I think that's why I've chosen that age group, because I remember an incredible flourishing of imagination. And I thought, you know, if I can take that sort of scientific world into that time and make it really fun. So a lot of the tests that we have done, I mean, Queenwood School came and tested our first game. And I remember the teacher who came with them, Dr. Lindy Walsh, Rosalind Walsh, she said, oh, once the kids realised they were going to have crazy fun, they were so engaged, they did not stop being engaged for the full 3 hours when they realised they could be as kooky as they wanted. And it's true, we had game designers and scientists working together. They were young, they were all students in their early 20s. And these young kids just loved thinking up puzzle games to solve scientific problems. And they came up with fantastic ideas, by riding bikes to generate powers, to incubate an egg, like really fantastic inventions. They thought through living and non-living things. They thought through chemistry and how to keep things hot or cold. And they had so much fun doing it that they've come back again and again to test our games and various things. So I think it's that spirit of fun, investigation, but imagination, creative, imaginative, safe spaces in which to play and learn.
Beautiful. That's amazing. So I can't wait till we can be buying your product, Catherine. It just seems like every school needs this, and it's about engagement, it's about problem solving, it's about the kids getting their hands dirty. And this is something that the scientist entrepreneurs that I have interviewed, this is the common ground. They've got to get in, and they've got to get dirty, and they've got to be, you know, combining the doing and the thinking and the problem solving.
Interesting.
The problem solving. So coming back to you and your journey and role models and challenges, which would you like to talk about first?
Maybe challenges. Maybe challenges.
When you think back, what has been the biggest challenge in your career to date? As a woman in a male-dominated environment, did you have issues around, I don't know, any biases or things that we hear about that are stopping a lot of women from staying in both, whether it be academia, whether it be in STEM careers, particularly perhaps around the parenting and working? And what comes up for you?
Probably two things. One is, I think, a bigger thing than any biases, and that is, I think, for multi-talented or people who cross many disciplines, I still don't think Australia is as accepting of that idea of a multifaceted professional. I think I definitely, when I went to South by Southwest in America, I had a grant to go over there, and there were quite a few billionaires giving really interesting keynote speeches, and a lot of them were extremely eclectic. Some had started off with satellite technology, and then when one of their children had gotten sick, they became organ developer, you know, they grew organs through xenotransplantation, and then after that went into AI. So very, very innovative thinkers, very entrepreneurial. Now, I do think Australia is becoming more entrepreneurial. I do think in the last 3 years to 5 years, I definitely think, even though the innovation kind of line is pulled out in every election, I feel the only people who really acted on it were, I feel Malcolm Turnbull really did put innovation into action, put a lot of money. I know there were cuts to CSIRO, but a lot of money came through to early stage innovation companies and really growing the economy that way. Now, I believe that that was a step in the right direction, because I think we are an innovative nation. I think we do think creatively and we think laterally, but there hasn't been the right environment. America's got an economy that fires very quickly and people can really make those ideas happen. But one thing about having kids is you can't just, well, I wasn't able to just go and live in Silicon Valley or go up to Queensland where there was a lot of innovation, smart state stuff going on. So I needed to stay in Sydney, and I found that there were blocks to being across disciplines. You're siloed and you're not encouraged. Interestingly, I found Macquarie Uni and the Incubator Hub there very open. And I think unis are getting more open to entrepreneurialism. But I do know that as an early graduate, an early career researcher, when I was trying to be entrepreneurial, it was not a good fit because I wasn't a traditional researcher.
What's the consequences of not embracing and being able to facilitate the cross-functional, cross-subject professionals and researchers?
Well, I think that interestingly, Macquarie is allowing a lot of that, and there's a lot of hybridity allowed. It's a smaller campus. It's less focused on research stars in the way some of the bigger unis might be. I believe that this on the ground interdisciplinary that is encouraged in universities such as Wollongong, Macquarie, it is a very good space I have found for women researchers. It allows those more hybrid approaches, but also has slightly more flexibility. And I think women need that. Well, I have needed that. I won't say, you know, of course, there's women who function fabulously at the top of those high research hierarchies. For me, as a creative and a researcher and also a mum, I needed to find a place that could fit that sort of combination. And but look, I will say it's been, I won't say it's been disappointing as a woman, but I remember when I was a younger woman, I always felt less confidence. And also I experienced the high competition amongst the younger men, and I at that stage didn't feel I could match it. As I got older and got more confidence, I did feel I could, but then we hit the hurdle of mothers being discriminated against because of their need for flexibility. Finally, having a lot of background experience and skill, suddenly I'm in a position where, oh, but actually I'm a bit older, and so I could face age discrimination. So I think there's discrimination for women, and there's gender stuff, and as you've mentioned, racial stuff, and also age stuff and sexuality, etc., at a whole lot of different stages. Look, I think being passionate and optimistic, I would say, makes me keep going, even though sometimes I kind of go, oh my God, is this absolute idiocy? Is it a hobby gone mad? Like sometimes I thought, am I just an eccentric hobbyist? Like,
well, but the thing is, Catherine, that the number one skill or trait that organizations, corporations are looking for now is creativity and innovation. Now,
yes,
this is, and so if we want to create a different world, and the future of work is commanding that, right? The rate of change in the world, as we know, the whole approaches and evidence-based approaches, and this is where the value of those science and tech backgrounds are important. And I just see that people like yourself who are bringing that A into STEAM, and you're bringing that creative lens through which we can learn the science and the maths. So we're seeing that the needs for people to be fit for work for the future are being required to be data literate, computer literate, and they're also looking for creativity and innovation. And this is where professionals like yourselves, Catherine, represent a whole new league of role models and trailblazers, because you've been doing this all your career already. So I'm keen to hear from you what you would nominate as your 3 strongest success traits. You could nominate 3. What might they be?
Thanks. Yes, I would say definitely one was definitely creativity. I feel that those creative skills that I learned very early on in my family have stood me in good stead, even though perhaps in our generation, I know I didn't learn much psychology from my family. There's been many things I've had to go out and learn for myself, but creativity I've come back to again and again. And I do hear creatives talking about that creativity can sort of rescue us in so many ways at so many different points in our life. Like, it's a great health giver. It can be a great way of enjoying life. It's an innate part of being a human, being creative, whether we sing. And we've seen so much creativity, especially in the early times of COVID, people singing across the balcony to each other, people writing stories together, people doing exhibitions and concerts online from their living rooms. Like, people's need to create, listen to music, listen to stories is an innate human need. So I feel creativity is a part of who we are. The other thing I would say, I've worked a lot in creative industries, and one thing I've learned there is forming partnerships and collaborations. And so collaborative work, you know, the power of a number of minds is more than the sum of its parts. So working with, and Forbes working with you and other people on my advisory committee, that synergy that comes from people from a range of different backgrounds, different skill sets, how we can expand our own knowledge and become really more masterful as a group. So my partnerships, and I guess I do have a love of communion with other people. Like, I love small groups. I love working in small groups, whether it's theatre, whether it's producing with game developers, whether it's working with advisors. I love that. I feel that's a skill of mine more than, say, politics. I just like working in big institutions at a political level is not my thing. Whereas and agility, I think being able to reinvent, because, you know, the arts funding went out of the arts very badly at the end of the last long Labor, the Keating-Hawke Labor government, and there was a long time of very poor arts funding. And really, I think going into research at that time, money was put into research, and I adapted and turned my work more into academic research, and now I'm going back out into business, and there's a lot more funding in innovation and business now. So agility, I would say agility, partnership building and creativity would be my 3 better skills. Thank you for asking. It helped me think it through.
Yes, and I was just marveling at that too, that with the agility and the creativity, I wonder if that has also helped you to see where the possibilities are, or where the opportunities are to be able to do that, because this is where creativity, being able to see different options, different ways, not being stuck just on one thing and one path. That's something that, as an entrepreneur, as people needing to pivot, we see the university system is changing, corporations are changing. So again, I believe that it will be people like yourselves, Catherine, that really will be those shining lights and the leaders of how to work, how to lead, how to create in these times of uncertainty, where agility has been like front and center and core to everything you've done since you've been at school. So I think that's a really key skill to draw out, and the collaboration as well. And you do work very effectively with people across many domains and backgrounds, and you bring that joy of life and compassion to your work as well. So thank you for that.
Leah, I'll just add one thing, which is I've always identified with being an innovator as well, which is a fourth thing. But I really do feel I've got from my father and my grandfather, who were engineers. And I now understand that it is in engineering. It's my son's now training to be an engineer, and it is a very creative field, in fact, because you've got to understand things, you've got to problem solve, you've got to find context, you work in contexts. And going to the university when my son was going to go into engineering, and seeing how they're now starting to market things like engineering degrees for girls and women, young women, with the context in which you can use engineering. So problem solving for societies, problem solving for social impact in other countries, building systems to help less developed countries. And I think that thinking through problems is something I saw my father and my grandfather do, and I probably inherited it in my DNA. My son's definitely got it. And so I think I have always been an innovator, and I've found it hard to find places.
So Catherine, you were sharing about your father and his grandfather being an engineer, and you having that appreciation for problem solving being in your DNA. And of course, that is a critical skill, isn't it, these days, the problem solving and the analytical skills that we attach to STEM educated and trained professionals. So coming from that engineering background, as you were saying as well. So in terms of wrapping up now, if I were to ask you what is there one thing that you know now that you wish you could have told your younger self, or you wish you had have known earlier in your career, that you think might have made the biggest difference to you? What would that one thing be?
I think one thing I've learned through being in the university sector and just seeing a lot more of that vocational stuff discussed, that you don't have to, I think often we can be put off things because we think I don't know that I'm fully interested in, say, I'm not a brilliant coder, say. Now, what I now know is that trying things out, like at uni, I tried out theatre and I tried out dance. Now, if coding had been something to try out, I think I would have. And what's really interesting is the way gender pay gaps work is that you're going to get much higher wages in the STEM sector. Now, that's not great, and we need to bring gender pay gaps closer together. However, you don't have to just be a coder to work in that space. You can be a manager, you can be a problem solver, you can be a strategist. You can, so I'm successfully working in a digital and tech space. I am learning all the time about shifts in technology, about new trends in technology. I myself am a fairly basic technologist, but during my doctorate, I did a lot of sound engineering. I did various things I had a go. I experimented at a number of things. Now, I would just say experiment in the whole lot, do some theatre, have fun. Performance skills are great. When you form your billionaire corporation, you have to play a role. Do that, but also, have a go at coding. Understand. If you've tried something, you can understand it. And I know many very famous film directors have taken acting classes. They've taken writing classes because you need to know what everyone on the team does. And so that's what I would say is try everything, because you can then work in a number of different sectors, and you might even find you're passionate and good at something you didn't think you were good at, and you might not have tried at school. So I would say in that university time to really give it a go at everything, but also at school, try opportunities and risk being a bit of an individual. I remember I used to want to do what my friends did, and risk doing something on your own if it's just a bit different to what your friends want to do. Give it a go, in that Aussie tradition of giving it a go. And that would be my thing. Have a go, experiment, take a risk.
Yeah, and this is the thing that about science, that it is about doing stuff. It is about taking action. And what I'm hearing from you, Catherine, as you say that, is give it a go, experiment with things. Like, just because you take one route doesn't mean that that's going to be the one thing. You don't have to make those big choices and think this is for life. You can actually dabble and try a few different things. And you mentioned coding. There's a number of initiatives in Australia that are giving that platform and opportunity for girls to try coding and learn coding, because again, this adage of if you can't see it, you can't have it. But what I'm hearing from you is, get in there and try stuff and do stuff, and don't be afraid to be different from others, because that's another thing that often holds us back, isn't it? If we are worried about what other people think, or we're worried we're not going to be good at something. And I think that's what I'm hearing through what you're saying. Like, treat it as an experiment, and don't be afraid if you don't think you like something. Give something a go anyway. And I wonder,
sometimes when we're younger, we don't. I think as you get older, you sort of do take. In some ways, I take more risks now than I did back then. But also, funnily enough, I do think art and science are very similar. I mean, one asks more questions, the other is, art is always asking a lot of questions, and science is often starting from an answer and then trying to prove it. But they're both very creative, and they're both making things up. One makes up stories, and science, you'll make up a hypothesis and then try and prove it. But they're both very creative fields. There's so much in common with science teams and art teams I've found through my hybrid work. I think science and art are both really fascinating areas to, if you're interested in science and art, you'll never get bored in your life, I would say. There's always something interesting to find in the world if you have those two modes of thinking.
Absolutely. Again, with your work with Dr. Egg Adventures, and you've got a digital platform, you've also got books coming out. If people are watching and listening and want to learn more about your work, or perhaps get in touch with you about how you do this hybrid profession as you do, that where would be the best to contact you?
Yeah, so I think through our website, so drreggadventures.com has contact sites, and that will soon also include a testing platform for our demo for in schools. So that there's a holding website there at the moment, and we're about to launch a new website, our new brand website, that will have the testing for teachers, for student teachers, and for parents during COVID, because with various lockdowns happening still in Victoria and stuff, a lot of parents have been looking for STEM, and also for English teachers who are in schools where they may only have the time due to COVID to teach maths and English. I've had a number of teachers talk to me about this. They don't have the time for science. You can be teaching science through Dr. Egg because it's cross-curriculum. There's a lot of English curriculum in there. And so there's lots of ways you'll be able to teach some science as you teach English. So just, there'll be some resources there that you'll be able to get really within the next. There'll be some resources there that you'll be able to get really within the next month.
Fantastic. We've got that web link on the video as well. So I'm really grateful to have shared this time with you, Catherine, and heard a little bit more about this incredible woman behind Dr. Egg and behind this cross-curricular, integrated, multi-passions that you have, that you've brought these together and have carved out a fascinating and successful career path for yourself. And it sounds to me like you're just getting started as far as service to community and our future students, and both girls and boys coming through to get excited and have fun with science. So to encourage them to follow that through into higher education and to then create careers. And as you say, they don't all have to end up in technical roles as jobs. There are so many different ways to go. So I do thank you for your time today, Catherine.
Yeah, and thanks for your great questions. It got me thinking about a whole lot of things, and I'm really looking forward to listening to the other interviews, actually.
Wonderful. Thank you so
really
much.
Great. Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.